These times are strange, it's quite surreal. It's never been like this. Remembering the good old days when we could hug and kiss. We'd pack the gyms and restaurants and move through public settings. We'd give high fives and drink at dives, hold hands and dance at weddings. Now the days are longer, yet they're darker in a way. We're pressing pause on normalcy, just going day by day. But we can still make jokes and art, garden, dance and sing, cook, read books, try on fun looks and learn about new things. We can talk with friends of ours and have a heart to heart, just so long as we'll stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do, stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you, 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical, so step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.
Hi, everybody. Hi, and welcome to 6 Feet Apart Productions. I'm so excited today. We're going to bring you our first show where every storyteller is telling a story, but they're also singing. It's so exciting. It's particularly thrilling for me because I am completely and utterly tone deaf. I can't sing. I just can't do it. In fact, when my son was 6 months old, I once attempted very stupidly to sing a nursery rhyme, and he turned around and put his pudgy little paw over my mouth to stop me singing. So even at that age, he knew I was really rubbish at singing. So for me, I'm in awe of anybody who can sing. But before we get started, what I'm going to do is I want to welcome everybody watching on YouTube. So hi, and please put some comments in the chat and we'll get to you and send the storytellers some love. That would be lovely. Also let us know where you're watching from, because that's really useful. And now what we're going to do is we've got a very small backstage audience, very exclusive. So welcome everybody in our backstage audience. So they'll be there throughout the show. So, as I said, we've got a really exciting show. We're going to have 4 storytellers who are going to sing at the same time, either sing the story or they're going to have singing as part of their story. And they'll each tell a 10 to 15 minute segment. And it's just going to be so exciting. I've been wanting to do this for ages. And you will be pleased to know that all of them, unlike me, they've got excellent voices. So first up, we've got Kim Whitekamp. Now, I'm sure everybody knows who Kim Whitekamp is, but she was also on our show in January called Reboot. And if you want to go and see, Kim did a fabulous story, then it's on our YouTube channel, which most of you are watching on now. So after this show, you can go and watch that for free. And it's called Reboot. Kim is a full-time storyteller. Well, she's hoping to be a full-time storyteller again when we're not in this pandemic hell. And she also teaches workshops and she's a keynote speaker. She hosts a morning show and has won enough awards to open her own trophy store. She also does lots of knitting and yarn and things like that. Something that I also find very amazing because I can't even sew on a button. If you want to find out more about Kim, go to her website, kimwhitekamp.com. And now I want to give you this quote, which is a really good quote I found of Kim's, that was quoted by Steve Perry from a radio station. He said, "If we are talking rock and roll, Tina Turner was a national treasure. Country has Dolly Parton. And in the world of storytelling, we have Kim Whitekamp." Isn't that lovely? So please join me in giving a huge welcome to our virtual stage to Kim Whitekamp.
Hi, everybody. I am so happy to be here with you today. Let's just go to this view right here. Awesome. I am so happy to be here with you today and to share a story about love. So I found myself single at the ripe age of about 48. Not the happiest time to be single. You know, my body was like clearance rack level. Wasn't really a marketable thing happening here. But I was kind of okay with that because I had been married 30 years, almost 30 years. And I was really kind of excited to be alone. I moved into a little apartment. I was living in Asheville, North Carolina, and everything was great, or so I thought. But then loneliness snuck up upon me. And I started to buy a lot of houseplants, and I started looking at cats and pets to adopt. And I thought, you're filling a void here. And what are you going to do? Well, one day I was coming back from a gig. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with cats and houseplants. But for me, I knew it was a sign. So I was on my way back to Asheville after a gig, and I pulled off to an overlook, and I had a real talk with the universe, God. I'm going to let you decide for yourself there. But I kind of looked up and I'm like, okay, I thought I'd really be into being alone, but it's not going well for me. And so if you want me to be alone, you're going to have to fix the thing here, because I need somebody to love. I got to love somebody. I have to be loving somebody and caring and tending them. And but if you want me to have somebody, I need you to walk them right up to me. And so I got out a piece of paper, weeping, and wrote a list of what I wanted in a man. And I said, there it is. So if you want me, if you're not, if you're gonna, if I'm to be alone, great. But if not, this is what I want. Have it walk right up to me. Well, I did my boohooing and looked over the majestic mountains, and then kind of was like, okay, I'm much better now. And I kind of forgot about that list, the list that is still in my phone. Well, it was about 3.5 months later, I was doing a gig in Culpeper, Virginia. And it was a 2-hour show. I had a Saturday and a Sunday show. And I had a break where I would go out to the table where our CDs are, where people take pictures of you because they think it's great. They're meeting somebody famous at like the very lowest possible level as a storyteller. Pictures that they will scroll through on the toilet about 3 weeks later and then delete. So all that good stuff that happens out at the CD table. And a man walked out. Now there were two, I like to call them elders, two elders working the table as volunteers. And this gentleman walked out and he said, I'd like to buy one of each of your albums. And I said, well, that's fantastic. So he bought one of each of my albums. And he said, I would like to take you to dinner. And I said, if you think buying all of my albums will make me go out to dinner with you, you're absolutely correct. But I said to him, I said, I really appreciate the offer, but I don't think so. And he said, why not? And I said, well, I'm not available. And he said, well, I don't see a ring on your finger. And I said, well, I was divorced just about 6 months ago, and I have a lot of baggage and I'm under repair. So I think it's best if I say no. And he said, under repair? I said, yeah, under repair. And he said, well, I've always heard it's good to fix something with the help of two people. I want to take you to dinner. And I said, listen, I said, just for the record, the undercarriage is locked. So if that's what you're looking for, you need to move along. And he said, excuse me. And I said, the undercarriage is locked. So if that's what you're looking for, you need to move along. Well, he threw his head back and he laughed, this deep from the belly laugh. It echoed throughout that lobby, crinkled the side of his eyes. And I'm like, geez, now that's sexy. That is a sexy thing. And then he looked at me and said, well, I'm a very patient man. I thought, this guy is slick. But I told him, I said, look, I don't think so. Well, the next day I did the show, and after they introduced me, I walked out, and there he was. I'm on stage trying to do the show, and dead center right out in front of me was that guy. Stress. The whole show, I kept thinking to myself, which way do I turn that makes me look thinner? Does my hair look okay? I can't believe he came another time. After the show, while people were applauding, he got out of his seat, walked up and stood at the stage, and people were applauding. And I'm kind of, the thing you do, thank you so much, because it means a lot that you're there. I walked off and I peeked back out and I'm like, he's still standing there. So I walked out because people were getting ready to leave. And I'm like, what are you doing? You need to go. And he's like, I'm not going until you go to dinner with me. Well, long story short, we did go to dinner, 3.5-hour dinner. We closed the place down. Our lives were so parallel, I could not believe it. Well, he lived up in West Virginia. I lived in Asheville. And so it was, and I was on the road for a pretty good solid 3 to 4 months after that meeting. And so a lot of what we did was by phone. It was by phone. And he kept saying, man, I really want you to come up and see where I live. I built a house up here in the mountains. Come see where I live. And well, the conversations were great. And I was kind of falling for him. And so I said to him, I called one day and I said, guess what? I said, I have a gig up your way. I mean, granted, it was 3 hours out of the way, but he didn't need to know that. So I'm just going to pop in. So on my way to this show, I left a day early. I went in and I pulled into the driveway. It was a long, mile-long driveway. And he said he built a house in the mountains of West Virginia. And I was like, please let there be, let it not, you just didn't know what I was going to walk into here. But as I went up the mile-long driveway, there was a beautiful home. And I parked the car and the door flew open and he said, man, you look great. And I said, thank you so much. He said, did you bring comfortable clothing? I said, well, yeah. He said, well, change. He said, I got some stuff planned. I said, okay. So I grabbed my bag and went into the house and he gave me a hug and I went in the bathroom. I was really happy to see him. I mean, we had talked and talked and talked and talked hours and hours and hours, but this was the first I'd seen him in months. And I changed into some comfortable clothes and came out and I said, well, what are we doing? He said, well, did you see the truck out in the driveway? And I said, well, yeah. I said, your truck? Yeah. He said, did you see what was in it? And I said, no. He said, well, come on. We walked out onto the front porch and he pointed and there was a whole bed of mulch in his truck. And he said, I'm so excited. He said, we're going to lay mulch. I said, oh, well, that's just great. And he said, yeah. And he said, it's going to be a really good time. So for that whole evening until dusk, we laid mulch. We laughed. We had a great time. And whenever the day sounds had quieted, we were finished. And we sat on the back of that truck and we had a cold drink. The night sounds began. We were filthy. And I thought this was the most fun I'd had in a long time. And he said, well, I want to ask you a question. He said, what did you think about laying the mulch? I said, what do you mean? He said, what did you think? I said, well, it was okay. He said, good, good. That's the way of my people up on this mountain. He said, that's the way of my people. And he said, I just want to make sure you're okay with that. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm okay with that. Well, I left the next day and about another 6 weeks went by and I was headed that way again. And I said, guess what? I'm coming back your way. He said, that's awesome. He said, I can't wait to see you. And so I pulled into the driveway. And as I pulled in, I couldn't pull right up to the house because there was another truck beside his truck. And both of the trucks had stone in the beds. And I walked in the house and he said, man, you look great. And I said, thank you. And he said, did you bring comfortable clothing? And I said, yes. He said, well, Jim is going to come up and we're going to lay stone. I need you to drive the truck and we're going to push the stone out and lay it down that mile driveway. And I was like, are you serious? And he said, yeah. So the whole time I was there, pushing out stone out of the back while I drove the car. Stop, go, following direction, which I think was a test. When it was all over, I was tired. They were exhausted. And he said, well, what did you think? And I said, well, it was okay. I just had to drive the truck. He said, you don't mind doing that kind of stuff, do you? I said, no, not really. I said, it's okay. And he said, well, it's the way of my people. And I just need to make sure that you're okay with that. I said, okay. Well, I left that time and I called my sister and I said, you know what, every time I go see this guy, I really, really like him. But every time I go, he makes me work. And she said, he's testing you. I said, excuse me? She said, he's testing you. I said, what are you talking about? She said, Kim, he lives on that mountain, 3,800 feet in the air. He's fully self-sustained. He gardens, he cans, he hunts, he's fully self-sustained on that mountain. And I think he must really like you because he's making sure that you can stick with it. Well, the next time I went back was only 2.5 weeks later. I pulled in and I went up and knocked on the door and there was no answer. So I opened the door and went through the house. And he always said, if I'm not up at the house, there's a big bell on the back, just ring it and you'll hear me. He lived in the middle of like 20,000 acres of untouched wild land. So I went out and I rang the bell and I heard, I'm in the garden. So I walked down this long, beautiful path through the woods to this garden that he had opened up trees, and it was over an acre and a half and beautifully called the Garden of Eden. And there he was on his knees in his garden. And around the edge of that garden were flats and flats and flats and flats of plants. He leaned back on his heels, looked up at me, said, "Man, you look good. Did you bring comfortable clothing?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, put them on and come down here and help me. We're going to have a good time." So I went up and I got all my comfortable clothing. I went down and we planted plants: spinach, lettuce, radish, squash, purple carrots, orange carrots, you name it. When we were done, we cleaned up and walked into the living room. He goes, "Well, what did you think about all the work down in the garden?" I said, No. I said, "I know, it's the way of your people." I said, "But I have something I did. I wrote you a song." He said, "What?" I said, "I wrote you a song." I said, "It's my turn. Sit down. I want to sing this song to you." And this is the song that I sang to him. "I thought I was your only darling, silly me. I stopped by without calling, silly me. Well, I guess I should have phoned, but I knew that you were home. Oh, I thought you'd be alone, silly me. I ignored Becky's Ford, silly me. Walked right up to your door, silly me. Well, I guess I should have knocked, but I knew it was unlocked. Oh, was I in for a shock, silly me, silly me, oh, silly me. I guess I lost touch with reality. To think someone like you could ever love a fool, oh, a fool like silly, silly me. Well, I must have lost my head, silly me. I went and shot you dead, silly me. Oh, thought I was justified, but they call it homicide, and tomorrow they will fry, silly me, silly me, oh, silly me. I guess I lost touch with reality. Oh, to think someone like you could ever love a fool, oh, a fool like silly, silly me. Oh, a fool, yeah, like silly, silly me. I said, "Well, what did you think?" And he said, "That's a pretty aggressive song." I said, "Well," I said, "that's the way of my people." I said, "That's the way of my people. And as long as we have an understanding, we're going to be okay." And he shook his head, yes. And we were married. And that is the story of how my husband and I courted and set each other straight.
Oh,
Good story.
excellent.
Thank you.
Yay.
Oh, Kim, that was so good. That's good. I was really not expecting that song. It's all romantic. I thought it was going to be lovely. It's like you killed him. The way of your people. He doesn't want to argue with you, that's for sure. Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you. So funny. So we're going to move on to our next storyteller. Our next storyteller is Paul Strickland, and he actually can definitely sing in tune as well. And he and Andy Offutt-Irwin took over our show in November last year, and they did songs and stories and whistling and lots of silly stuff. So if you want to go and have a look at that, that's free on our YouTube page 2 channel, and that's called Family Fiction. Now, some of you may know that Paul doesn't always tell true stories. He does a lot of tall tales, and his Ain't True and Uncle False received the Best of Fest award at the Cincinnati Fringe Festival, and he's won loads of awards, and he tells stories all across the country, from comedy clubs to schools, from the national storytelling festivals, even in prisons. But he does want to assure us that he's not an inmate, but he wasn't at the time, and that's his story, and he's sticking to it. He was a featured teller at the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival in September last year, and he's already been booked for loads of festivals this year. So if you you can go and see him on his at any festival that's going on, probably most of them. So please welcome Paul Strickland.
Thank y'all so much. This is so great. I'm so glad to be here. Doing any show with Kim Whitekamp is always a blessing, but man, you don't want to have to follow her. You just don't want to have to go next. And so, she also stole my topic. I was going to do a story about a woman that killed a dude, but instead, I think what I'll do is maybe a little bit more of what we talked about last time, which is the way in which I like to keep the liar in peculiar. So why don't we do a cross between a newfangled fable and a peculiar parable. And this is that piece. It's going to start with this melody line inside this fingerstyle guitar. Thank y'all so much for being here. This story is about two men primarily. A man by the name of Ed Smith III and a man by the name of Bertram Lineberry the Only. Now, in regards to Ed Smith III, I would have to say ennui is way too interesting a word. He was boring. He prided himself on how boring he was, which is a boring thing to pride oneself on, which was exactly how Ed Smith III preferred it. He was boring. He was the kind of fellow that liked to take medium walks. He worked part-time from home, calling insomnia sufferers on the phone and telling them all about himself. Well, one day, Ed Smith III heard tell that the world's most boring person competition was being held once every 6 years in the town of Bland, Maryland, in a Best Western conference room. And so he started saving up. He said, "Everyone has a gift." To the man on the other end of the line who replied by snoring. Bertram Lineberry the Only. Bertram Lineberry the Only in 1959 was 36 years old, and he was so arrogant. He was so arrogant, he started putting up blank plaques everywhere he went. Blank plaques everywhere he went in anticipation of one day doing something historic. This story is about these two men, and the story is called Arrogant and Boring. May the arrogant learn something from the boring, and may the boring find the thing that makes them great. May the arrogant learn something from the boring, and may the boring find the thing that makes them great. In 1999, Bertram Lineberry the Only, now 76 years old at that time, lost his appeal against a federal lawsuit stating that the act of placing blank plaques everywhere you go in anticipating doing something historic is in fact defacing. The judge added, "You've reached the peak of arrogance, just the height of arrogance, to deface so much with nothing at all." Bertram Lineberry the Only was required by law to take down every blank plaque personally. Also, in 1999, Ed Smith III took home second place at the world's most boring person competition, which he insisted meant he was the most boring. How could the winner be the most boring? The moment they become the winner, they are less boring. That's just how it works. He said that to the organizers of the event, and they just stared at their shoes and yawned. Days later, distraught, he was back at work, and he said into the phone, "Second place was what I was going for. What I was going for was second place." And the woman on the other end of the line, who was nodding off, replied, May the arrogant learn something from the boring, and may the boring find the thing that makes them great. May the arrogant learn something from the boring, and may the boring find the thing that makes them great. December 2nd, 1999. Ed Smith III, still distraught over his lack of recognition at the world's most boring person competition. He said into the phone, "I can't wait another 6 years to prove that I'm great at something." And he slammed down the receiver. The man on the other end of the line bolted out of his weird dream and yelled out, "Fish fruit!" Bertram Lineberry the Only drove back hundreds of miles through his past. Blank plaque after blank plaque after blank plaque after blank plaque. And after a while, the metaphor stopped being lost on him. He started thinking to himself, maybe I have wasted my life, spending all of my days thinking about how I was going to be great. As he unscrewed each blank plaque, he stared at the muted reflection of his own wrinkled face in the brass, and he started saying out loud, unscrewing those blank plaques, I think I've wasted my life, spending all of my days thinking about how I was going to be great. Ed Smith III, after slamming that receiver down, he took a moderately exasperated medium walk. It was mid-afternoon. He walked the path he always walked. Of course, that's what he did. He walked the path he always walked, the sidewalk that ended in that blank plaque. But that day, he was still moderately exasperated when he got there, so he didn't do what he always did and turn around and walk back. He stepped out into the road, and kept walking around the curve, along the guardrail that overlooked that valley hundreds of feet below. Bertram Lineberry the Only didn't even tap his brakes until after he had struck Ed Smith III. And Ed Smith III somersaulted ragdoll missile-like out over that guardrail, 15 or 20 yards out, hundreds of feet over the valley below. And just as he should have started to fall, he levitated. And at first he looked as surprised as you do. But then he just started walking on air back towards solid ground. And Bertram Lineberry the Only slowly rolled down his tinted passenger side window, and he found the only word he could find. How? And Ed Smith III, now sitting safely on the guardrail, was dusting off his khakis. And he said, I think I'm so boring, I'm incapable of a spectacular death. And then he just walked back past that blank plaque toward home. May the arrogant learn something from the boring. May the boring find the thing that makes them great. May the arrogant learn something from the boring. And may the boring find the thing that makes them great. Ed Smith III, every day for the rest of his life after that, walked with a limp. But the limp was on both sides, so no one noticed, and it wasn't interesting. He never competed in the world's most boring person competition again. He decided that being great at being boring is something that you should just prove to yourself. He lived the rest of his life with the conundrum of how in the world you can be so boring you're incapable of a spectacular death, but not too boring to levitate. But like all of us, friends, like all of us, Ed Smith III had to learn how to navigate life despite several unanswerable questions. Bertram Lineberry the Only died a few weeks later at the age of 77 in his giant mansion, surrounded by thousands and thousands and thousands of possessions, all of which started to look to him like so many blank plaques. There's only one blank plaque that remains, and it actually ain't blank. It's the one where that sidewalk ends. The day after Bertram Lineberry the Only did not kill Ed Smith III, he had that plaque engraved with these words: "May the arrogant learn something from the boring. May the boring find the thing that makes them great. May the arrogant learn something from the boring. And may the boring find the thing that makes them great." Thank you so much.
Yay! Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. What a lovely voice you have. I'm in my family, we have a little tradition that we have. It's a bit odd. And we sing, well, it doesn't sound very odd. We just sing each other happy birthday. But the odd thing is that we, obviously, because we can't sing in tune, we make it very obviously out of tune. And we do really hideous, caterwauling happy birthday. And so we always do it, no matter where we are in the world. So I have to get up early, sing them horrible happy birthday. And my sister just had her birthday recently. So obviously I did that thing of ringing her up and singing happy birthday really badly. And she said somebody else that day had sung happy birthday, but properly, in tune. And she looked at them as if they were mad. It's like, why aren't you singing the song properly? Because we only ever think it should be sung out of tune now. So we're a bit strange in my family. Anyway, thank you, Paul. I'm very glad you didn't sing out of tune. Lovely, very excellent story. So our next singer and storyteller tonight is, actually, before we go back to onto the next one, I just want to say hello to people in YouTube land. And apparently the people in YouTube land there's people there from Oakland. I wonder if that's my friend Marianne, Montana, Washington, DC, Monterey, Pittsburgh, and I think other places too. I'm pretty sure there's somebody there that, she who must not be named, who's from Fairfax, but we won't talk about her. Our next storyteller tonight is Rachel Ann Harding, and she is passionate about finding and telling the most beautiful folk, myth, and traditional tales. She began singing and playing instruments when she was in her early 20s, and her music has been called delightful, folksy avant-garde. She believes that fairy tales are not just for children, and I so agree, absolutely. And she mesmerizes audiences with old tales woven into new adventures. She's also the producer of a podcast, Story Podcast, and you can find out more about that and loads more about Rachel on rachelannharding.com. All those websites, by the way, are down in the notes below in YouTube and on wherever you can, and lots of different places. So go and have a look. Rachel was also on our Friday Fright Night in October. She told a spooky story, and at the end she wowed us with a song, which were quite unexpected. We didn't know she was going to do that. All my family in England thought it was amazing, because obviously we're all equally bad at singing. So please welcome to our virtual stage, Rachel Ann Harding.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I'm with this excellent group of musicians. I am going to tell you a traditional tale today. It was collected by Seamus McManus, and then I'm pairing it with a song that is adapted. I've adapted this tune. You might know it. You might have heard it, and it's as old as the Irish Hills, I think. So If you know it, you can sing along at home because no one can hear you, but I'm sorry for the words that I've changed and I'll completely mess you up at that point. The whistling tinker came over the hill, down to the valley so shady. He whistled and he sang till the green woods rang, and he won the heart of a lady. Fiona, the daughter of the King of Connacht, refused to marry the King of Ireland's son. Her father almost had apoplexy when she looked at the King of Ireland and said, "I don't care if you make me Queen of Heaven. I won't marry a man I don't know, much less a man I don't love." The King of Ireland was not about to force her, and so he left, saying that if Fiona changed her mind, in 5 weeks she was welcome to attend the coronation and marry his son then if she chose to. Fiona's father was less understanding. If you think you can make a jest out of this, if the Prince of Ireland is not good enough for you, then in 1 week, any man who gathers in my courtyard, you will choose your husband from among them. Well, word got out, and men began to arrive, nobles, kings, princes, knights, and Fiona watched them gather. It was easy to see the man who stood out. He was in rags, he carried a pack on his back, but more than that, he had a tune on his lips. The castle dogs who didn't take to anyone were friendly with him. The pack of children that were always making mischief were settled by his entertainment. He whistled quite well. Now, the castle guards were thinking to throw this man out. Why was he among the nobles? But the man protested. He was Jeremy Donn, King of the Tinkers. He was royalty, and so he should be allowed to join the men for Fiona to choose from. Now, Fiona's father thought that he could make a joke out of this, shame Fiona a little bit for the choice that she had made, and so Jeremy Donn was allowed to stand among the nobles. Fiona and her father stepped out and viewed the men. Her father took them in. "Choose well, daughter, for your husband to be is him." She pointed at Jeremy. "I choose him." Her father's face went this lovely shade of purple, and the vein in his head bulged. "If you think this is a jest, you will regret it. If you choose that man, you will leave today with only the clothes on your back. There will be no wedding. There will be no dowry." Fiona looked at Jeremy. She looked at her father. She took the rings from her fingers. She took the bracelets from her wrists, the circlet from her head. She dropped them in front of him with only the clothes on my back. And she went and picked up Jeremy's pack, put it on her shoulder, and walked out the gates with him. She left her father's castle gate, left her gold and silver, left her servants and her estate, to follow the whistling rover. Now that night, as they sat at the campfire, and the tinkers around them began to cook what little food they had, Jeremy sat beside Fiona. "My dear, I think you will regret this choice. When were you to marry the Prince of Ireland?" Fiona looked at him. "It was to be in 4 weeks' time." "Then we will not marry until that day, so you know well the life that you are choosing with me." Fiona looked at him and shook her head. "Jeremy Donn, you will learn to listen to me. My choice is made, and change I'll never." The next day, they woke with the dawn and they walked. And Fiona's slippers that were made for dancing and maybe a stroll casually through a garden were not made for the road. And soon her feet were a mass of blisters. Jeremy carried her down to the river to soak her feet that night. "Fiona, wouldn't you rather marry the King of Ireland's son? These blisters will not go away for a long time." "Yes, but they will go away. And I would not be with someone I don't care for. And I care for you, Jeremy. My choice is made, and change I'll never." They walked day after day after day. And Fiona had to carry her own pack. It was heavy. Her back grew sore. Every day when she put it down, she felt it took time for her to stop hunching over. Jeremy would sit behind her and massage her shoulders. Fiona, wouldn't you rather be the Queen of Ireland, not have to carry such a heavy pack? My back will grow strong enough in time, thank you. My love for you will continue to grow as long as you keep rubbing that shoulder there. My choice is made. Change I'll never. Days walked by and by and by. And Fiona's dress, which was made for few parties to stand and show off a bit, was not made for the road. And so the tear and the fraying began. As she sat one night sewing her dress, Jeremy sat down. He took the needle from her and he began to sew a tear on her sleeve. Fiona, wouldn't you rather be dressed in silks and satins instead of sewing your dress together every night? Fiona took the needle back from him. Jeremy Don, my choice is made and change I'll never. She left behind her velvet gowns and shoes of silk and leather. They whistled and they sang till the green woods rang as they traveled on together. Soon the tinkers turned to go where everyone was going, the coronation. As they walked along the road, they came past a castle. The stone was white, silken flags flying. Fiona had never seen a castle like it. Who is that for? Jeremy looked up at the castle. That's for the new Queen of Ireland, Fiona. Oh, is it? Well, she'll need that kind of grandeur to keep her from remembering she's married a man she doesn't love. As they walked on the road, they were soon forced off as wagon after wagon came by carrying loads of goods. Fiona looked at these wagons full of fine silks and treasures. Who are all of these things for? Jeremy Don looked at them. Fiona, those are for the Queen of Ireland. Ah, that makes sense. She would need all of these to distract her from a miserable life she'll have of living with someone she doesn't love. And after these wagons came men in white and green livery, women following after them. Where are all these people going? It is a veritable army, said Fiona. Well, these folks? Jeremy looked at her. These are the ladies in waiting and the footmen and the servants for the Queen of Ireland. Fiona, wouldn't you rather be the Queen of Ireland than Queen of the Tinkers? Fiona looked at those passing. Well, maybe I should become the Queen of Ireland. Really? No, what? Not at all. I've made my choice and change I'll never. She left behind her goose feather bed with silken sheets for cover. Each night she sleeps by the fireside in the arms of her whistling rover. Coronation Day arrived. And with all the crowds in the street, Fiona and Jeremy pushed forward to the very front, to the very steps of the cathedral. And there they sat. There was where the prince was to be crowned king. As they sat with those humming around them, a herald stepped out, looking very full of himself, carrying his trumpet. He blew 3 long blasts, got everyone's attention. Hereby we call Fiona, daughter of the King of Connacht, come and be crowned Queen of Ireland. Fiona took no notice. She sat down on the ground, she took off her shoes and began to rub her sore feet. Jeremy looked down. Fiona, they're calling for you. Go be Queen of Ireland. She looked up at him. I have no interest in being Queen of Ireland. Now sit down and rub my feet. Jeremy sat down and took her foot in his lap as the herald let an amount of time go by. He raised his trumpet again, 3 long blasts. Hereby for the second time we call Fiona, daughter of the King of Connacht, to come and be crowned Queen of Ireland. Jeremy set her foot aside and looked at the trumpeter and looked at Fiona. She took no notice. She instead rummaged in his pocket and found a crust of bread and began to gnaw on it. And Jeremy looked at her. Fiona, forsake hunger. Go be Queen of Ireland. Fiona found that the bread was a little too hard to eat, so she gave it to a stray dog who had curled up next to Jeremy. No, I will not forsake hunger if it means forsaking you. My choice is made, and change I'll never. The trumpeter let an awkward amount of time go by, and then 3 more blasts. Hereby for the 3rd time we call Fiona, daughter of the King of Connacht, to come and be crowned Queen of all of Ireland. And Jeremy looked at Fiona. Go, be Queen of Ireland, wear fine gowns. Would you rather not be that? And she looked at him and she said, for the last time, Jeremy, my choice is made and change I'll never. I will be Queen of the Tinkers. And Jeremy stood and he extended his hand down to her. And he said, that's what you choose. You will be Queen of the Tinkers and walk this hard road beside me. And she put her hand in his and she said, yes, I'm glad you're finally listening because my choice is made and change I'll never. And Jeremy held her hands tightly in his, and he said, I'm glad to hear that. There is something I need to tell you. I am no tinker, my lover, he said, but Prince of Ireland over. Will you stay till your dying day with your traveling, whistling rover? And he held her hands very tightly, waiting for her answer, because he loved her very much, but he also could feel that she was very frustrated and her eyebrows were up. She smiled. Jeremy, you're lucky my choice is made, and change I'll never. And he leaned in to kiss her and said, I promise I'll make it up to you. And they were crowned Queen and King of Ireland that very day, to the cheers of the crowd. Heavenly happy that day was Fiona. And a less happy day she did not know until her peaceful end. The whistling tinker came over the hill, down through the valley so shady. He whistled and he sang till the green woods rang, and he won the heart of a lady. Thank you.
Yay.
Yay.
Oh, Rachel, that's such a lovely story. Really nice. I want you to come and sing me a bedtime story every night, please. I'm sure you've got a CD that I could probably buy and have that have the same thing happen, couldn't I? Now, our final storyteller is making his debut on the 6 Feet Apart Productions. I've been wanting to have him on our show for quite a long time. I saw him ages ago at a festival where he told a story and then sang, and that sort of sparked this idea to have this whole singing, talking story show. So you can blame Sam for that. So Sam Payne, he hosts the Appleseed, which is an award-winning national radio show on the art of storytelling. He's been part of the Peabody-nominated team that created Treasure Island 2020, the serial podcast based on Robert Louis Stevenson's classic novel. He's travelled all over the world telling stories. He's had performances at the Kennedy Centre for Performing Arts, the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesborough, and also the Timpanogos Festival. He's an author, a teacher, has loads of CDs, loads of things you can get. So go to his website, sampayne.com. And I found quite a good quote about Sam too. Think of I can't speak today. Think of Bruce Springsteen, for example, talking about how he wrote The River, and then imagine if the boss were a clean-cut returned missionary. Isn't that lovely? So please give a huge 6 Feet Apart Productions welcome to Sam Payne.
It is such a pleasure for me to be with you, 6 feet apart. I mean, we've gotten so good at this, haven't we? Talking at great distances from one another. And I know that the sentiment behind 6 feet apart is this notion that we've got to be distant from each other. But good heavens, I don't know that I'm ever closer than 6 feet apart than to anybody that I'm ever performing for. Usually it's 100 feet apart. And so here I am, only 6 feet apart from you guys. And it's fantastic. I just got to say, it's fantastic. It's fantastic to be in your home, and it's fantastic to have you in mine. I love making music. I love telling stories, and where those two intersect, that's just the place I really, really love to be. My kids are all almost grown, but when my youngest was just a tiny, tiny little guy, bedtime was song time, and I would sing to him, "Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird." Or I'd sing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." One night, that 3-year-old kid said, "Tonight, Dad, I want you to sing the Secret Fighter song." And I said, "The Secret Fighter song? There's no such song as the Secret Fighter song." "The Secret Fighter song?" He said, "Yeah, the Secret Fighter song." So I did what you would have done. I just made up a song right there on the spot. And it went like this. Secret fighter, running on the ground and climbing in the trees. Secret fighter, crawling on the hands and crawling on the knees. Secret fighter, climbing all around in the little yellow cars. Secret fighter, fighting on the ground and reaching for the stars. And it was a hit, man. He loved it. It was Secret Fighter. Every night after that, we'd Secret Fighter it up before bed. He'd say, "Sing the Secret Fighter song, Dad." And I'd sing and I'd do a scat solo. I'd say, "You take a solo, son." And he was 3 years old, so he'd go, "Yeah, yeah, 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 yeah." And then, we'd bring it in home, fighting on the ground and reaching for the stars. And after, I don't know, 5 or 6 days of that, I learned from my 3-year-old that on that first night, he hadn't been asking for Secret Fighter at all. He'd been asking for Eensy Weensy Spider. But I'll tell you, great musical moments spark memories. I've always thought that, I've always felt like great pieces of music are like zip files, those files that you download onto your computer because they contain something you love. And they're only just a couple of megabytes big, and you touch one of them, you just click on one of them, and it springs open into a memory that's much, much larger than the file itself. It happened to me just the other day. I was listening to some old stuff. I was cleaning off a hard drive on my computer, and I found a bunch of old recordings of a band that I used to play with. I used to be the front man of a jazz quintet. Played with those guys for years and years and years and years. Loved it so, so much. I had the members of the band were Carlisle Potter. He played bass. Carlisle Potter was like the CEO of a company. We'd get a phone call from him from Tokyo on Wednesday night just to tell us that he was going to be on time for rehearsal on Thursday, back in St. George, Utah. And the drummer was a guy named Corky Allerton. Corky was 2 hours late to his own wedding because he couldn't find a place in Las Vegas that would rent him a full Revolutionary War officer's uniform, which is what he wanted to wear to get married in. And he kept kind of the spirit of rock and roll in our gigs. I remember playing a gig at a swimming pool one time. It was a birthday party for some high mucky muck of something. And we ended the show with the theme song from the Flintstones. We used to play the theme song from the Flintstones. And we got to have a yabba dabba gay old time. We'll have a gay old gay old time. Rum da 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 da. There's this cacophony of music going on until finally the lead singer is supposed to jump up in the air and land and stop everybody. But before I could jump up in the air and stop everybody, Corky had stood up on the drum throne at his drum kit, and he had launched himself out over us, holding his drumsticks in his hand, fully clothed, and in a perfect cannonball splashed down in the swimming pool and came up with his hands in the air and said, "Spirit of rock and roll, man!" Oh, that was playing with those guys was so great. Our guitar player was Ryan Tilby, who had just come home from, speaking of missionaries, right? Being a missionary in Spain. Skinny little guy, played like he'd made a deal with the devil, But the elder statesman of the band was a guy named Dennis Zwang. He was older than any other member of the band by half a generation. Big, tall guy, big walrus mustache, played the saxophone, and we loved playing with Dennis. The name of the band was the Utah Jazz. And we never got in trouble for using that name, except for one time. We were hired to play the Carbo Load Dinner for the St. George, Utah Marathon. And so there we were, all standing around, hundreds, thousands of runners all around us. And this little knot of teenagers came in the back door carrying their basketballs because they had heard that the Utah Jazz were going to be there. And they wanted them to sign their basketballs. So we signed them. I'm telling you, being members of the Utah Jazz, that was the stuff. We were driving along one time with Dennis Zwang, the saxophone player. We knew he was a vegetarian, and somebody asked him in the car, said, "What is it, Dennis? Is it just poultry and fish that you don't eat? I mean, what is it?" And Dennis turned around from the front seat of the car, and he pulled his glasses down like this, and he looked over the top of his glasses, and he said, "Nothing with a face, man." And then we drove on to the gig. Dennis was a soft-spoken guy, a Dutch-Indonesian immigrant. He had come to the United States with his family, settled in San Diego when he was a little kid, and his dad was an engineer and had an opportunity to take a job in the Pacific Northwest. But just about that time, Dennis's little sister got sick, and the best place for her to be cared for was a hospital in Salt Lake City, Utah. And they had a choice to make as a family, and they chose to come to Salt Lake City and get the treatment for his little sister. His dad didn't have a job, and so they would visit with his sister in the hospital during the day, and the whole family would go into downtown Salt Lake and sleep on the benches in Pioneer Park at night, and then in the morning they'd go back to the hospital and hang out with his sister. We loved playing with Dennis. Dennis, when he was a kid in those dark, hard days, I mean, his sister got better and his dad got a job, but there was a dark, hard time where Dad would take little Dennis down into the record stores in downtown Salt Lake City, and they would listen to Thelonious Monk together, and they would listen to Duke Ellington together, and they would listen to Louis Armstrong together. And that's how Dennis Zwang came to learn to love music. Well, we had a gig one time at a beautiful amphitheater right at the edge of Zion National Park, this impossibly beautiful scenery surrounding this outdoor amphitheater, the O.C. Tanner Amphitheater. The gig was on a Wednesday, and I called on a Monday. I said, "Hey, Carlisle, you ready to go?" And Carlisle, the bass player, said, "Yeah, I'm ready to go." I called Corky, the drummer, said, "Are you ready to go?" He said, "Yeah, I'm ready to go." I called Ryan, the guitar player, said, "Are you ready to go?" He said, "I'm ready to go." And I called Dennis, and Dennis said, "Oh, yeah, we got a gig on Wednesday, don't we?" I said, "Yeah." And I talked to Dennis on that phone call. His response was a little unusual. I found out that his father, his good old father, his father that had taught him how to love music, had just that morning passed away. I said, "Dennis, don't worry about coming to the gig. There are still 4 of us. We'll be fine. Of course, we love you. Of course, we'll miss you. But be with your people. Be with your family." He said, "No." He said, "My dad taught me to love music. I think I might like to come play the gig. The funeral is in the morning. I think I could make the gig in the evening." I thought he was delirious. But I said, "Dennis, you do what you feel good about. We're going to be okay. You be with your people." Well, we showed up on Wednesday night to do the gig, and we loaded all our stuff in, and we mic'd up the drums, and we sound checked the guitar, and we ran through the set list, and we made sure everything was set like it needed to be. And we were just about to open the doors and let people into the amphitheater when into the parking lot came Dennis's old Toyota Corolla. He parked, and he got out of the car. He was still wearing the blue suit that he had worn to his father's funeral. He got in the trunk of his car and he pulled out bags of horns, all these horns, saxophones, clarinets, flutes, and he carried them into the amphitheater, and he sat backstage, and we gathered around him and we said, "Dennis, we love you. We're glad to see you. We're sorry for your loss." And then he wanted to kind of be alone for a while, as you can imagine. He got ready. He moistened up his reeds. And there came the time when we all took the stage. We went out on the stage and we started to play music. And Dennis, I'm telling you, he just exploded onto stage. We played Route 66, "Get Your Kicks on Route 66. We tossed a solo to Dennis, and Dennis took his horn in one hand and he put it in his mouth and he started to play. And then he took in his other hand another saxophone and he put that mouthpiece in his mouth and he pounded out a double saxophone solo. We looked on in wonder, and he just led the charge as we took that stage and we played all sorts of stuff. We played It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing. Come on, Dennis. And the audience went crazy and we went crazy. There came a time in the show when we decided we were going to do that great George Gershwin tune, Our Love Is Here to Stay. It was written in the 30s. It was the last song that George Gershwin ever wrote. He wrote it for a movie called The Goldwyn Follies, and he died before ever seeing before ever seeing the song, even with lyrics. After he died, his brother Ira Gershwin, the great lyricist, the great American lyricist, wrote lyrics to that song written by his brother. The lyrics had words like, "It's very clear our love is here to stay, not for a year, but ever and a day. In time, the Rockies may crumble, Gibraltar may tumble, they're only made of clay, but our love is here to stay." These beautiful lyrics written by Ira Gershwin for his brother George. And we started to do that piece of music. Now, I'm the band leader, and what that means is I'll sing through the first chorus of the tune, and then I might make eye contact with the guitar player, and he knows that he's supposed to take a chorus as an improvised solo. And then I might make eye contact with the guitar player and take the solo back and hand it to the bass player, and the bass player will take a chorus as a solo, an improvised solo. And there came a time when I got the eye contact of the guy who had just had the solo, and I got the eye contact of Dennis and said, "Take a solo." Well, Dennis started to play. In that beautiful place, at the edge of Zion National Park, that saxophone music just spiraled up and up and up through those canyons, as beautiful echoes. Dennis playing Our Love Is Here to Stay. One look at him and you knew who he was playing for that day. In time, the Rockies may crumble, Gibraltar may tumble, they're only made of clay, but our love is here to stay. He played through a chorus, and we thought, let's give him another chorus. And he played through another chorus. It was the most beautiful music we'd ever heard. And then at the end of that second chorus, I went over to Dennis, and I tried to make eye contact with him to take the solo away and hand it off to somebody else, or take it back and sing us out myself. But Dennis's eyes were closed, and there were big tears rolling down his cheeks as he thought about his dad playing that beautiful music. And so ever so gently, I reached out and I touched him on the shoulder, and Dennis, unequivocally and not terribly gently, elbowed me right out of the way. And around again he went, around a couple of more solos, and we just listened as he played and played. Echoing through the canyons. And we heard in those notes of that solo Dennis's words to his dad. We heard him saying through that music, "Dad, it's only been a couple of days and I already don't know what I'm going to do without you. Dad, here are all the things that I said that I wish I hadn't said in my whole life. Here are all the things that I never said and I wish that I had said." Up and up went that solo, and then in a long decrescendo, as the band decrescendoed and came to a stop and let Dennis finish out the song by himself, that song came down and down and down and down, finally into silence. Dennis stood there with his eyes closed. And it was a long time, it seemed, probably only a few seconds, but it seemed like a good long time before the audience started to applaud. Dennis didn't even hear it. For Dennis, there was only him and his dad. And finally, we tapped him on the shoulder, told him to open his eyes, and he opened his eyes and saw that ovation before him for that great music. A lot of people ask me what the most powerful experience I've ever had on stage might be. And I don't know how to answer that question, but my mind is often drawn back to that saxophone prayer by Dennis Zwang for his good old dad. But oh, my dear, our love is here to stay. Together we're going a long, long way. In time, the Rockies may crumble, Gibraltar may tumble. They're only made of clay, but our love is here. Our love is here. Our love is here to stay. Thank you so much. What a pleasure to be with you tonight.
Yay.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Sam. Thank you so much. What a lovely story. That was really sweet. How nice. And thank you. It was lovely to have you on our show.
Thank you.
And unfortunately, that's it. That's the end of our show. I know, I just loved all the different, all so completely different. And I loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Thank you so much. Making my little idea come true. So just before we go, we're going to bring our storytellers back in just a second. But I just want to say that our show wouldn't be here at all if it wasn't for the very clever talents of our tech guru, Mr. Mark Hennessy. Also, thanks to my son, Tom, for all the artwork. And our beautiful title song, 6 Feet Apart, was written and performed by Julia Mark. Go and check her out. She's got albums and stuff. You can also go and see all our new shows coming up, sfapshows.com. Look at our Facebook page. Please like us on Facebook. Please subscribe to YouTube. So now I'd like to bring back our 4 storytellers. So let's bring back Kim Whitekamp. Yay! Hi, Kim. Thank you so much. And do you have anything that you've got coming up that you would like to tell us about?
Yes, actually I do. I have the Women's Storytelling Festival coming up. And
Yes.
that is going to be
19th,
the weekend of the 19th. Yeah. And it is 3 days. There are 36 women coming together to tell stories. It is going to be amazing. So I'm really excited about that. And then I have Storyville coming up. You can just find that on Facebook or the internet. I'm also going to be on Don White's show. And that's just within the next week. So I'll stop there. And the best part is, I don't know, I'm sure the other tellers are having this happen too, but we're getting calls for real gigs. Not that this isn't, but like you go and you like see human beings. So I'm so stoked about that. That's exciting.
That's what we're all waiting for, I know. Anyway, good. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
And let's bring back on Paul Strickland. Hi, Paul. Thank you so much for a hilarious song. And what have you got coming up?
Actually, on this coming Saturday, actually a week from now, there's going to be a show that is 5 different tellings of Rumpelstiltskin. And so I will be sharing Uncle False's Rumpelstiltskin at that show, which is definitely a different version than you or I have ever heard before. So very excited about it.
Oh, great. Well, I can't wait for that. Thank you. Presumably it's all on Facebook and your website.
Yes.
Yeah, lovely. And let's bring back Rachel Ann Harding. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
And what have you got coming up?
So we got 2 shows in the next week. I live in Longmont, Colorado, and our local museum has a small exhibit of some Monet and some Impressionists work. And they have gathered myself, Cooper Brown, and another local storyteller, Kathy, to do storytelling for them. And that'll be this Thursday, but it will be broadcast, so you can watch it from wherever you are. And that'll be Thursday, the 11th. And then I'm going to be in the same show with Paul. We're going to be doing Rumpelstiltskin variations. So I am excited. I have a new Rumpelstiltskin that's never walked out and about, and I'm very excited about it.
Excellent. Wonderful. Can't wait for all of those. And then let's bring back finally Sam Payne.
First of all, it's been such a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you so much. Next week, I'm excited to be on this same kind of stage, the Zoom stage, at the Texas Storytelling Festival. And that's easy to find. Just Texas Storytelling Festival in your search window. And that's going to be a really great weekend of stories and music. I'm super excited about it. And of course, I'll take every opportunity I can to tell people about the Appleseed. It's such a pleasure for me to see people on right here in the Zoom window whose work we play on the Appleseed. It's the pleasure of my life to bring the work of my fellow storytellers to the radio just about every day. BYUradio.org/Appleseed is where you find that, or just Google the Appleseed podcast and subscribe. Something new just about every day.
Perfect. Lovely. Well, thank you all so much. And I'm going to hand over now to my co-producer, Regina Stoops, who's going to talk to you about something very special we've got coming up.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you to all of our storytellers and singers. That was a great show. Really, really loved it. We are very excited that on March 29th is our 1-year anniversary. Who knew we'd be doing this for a year? But 1-year anniversary, and we are going to have a big old party show. It's going to be free. We're going to celebrate the fact that we've had 30 shows, 122 stories, 2,400 minutes live streamed, 84 storytellers, one awesome theme song, and one Zoom bomb, among other things. Money donated to charity, and YouTube likes, Facebook likes. We're very excited about it. And here are the folks that are going to be there. Among them, Jessica Robinson's Better Said Than Done, Women's Storytelling Festival, Simon Brooks, Diane Ferlat, Kate Farrell, Brandon Spars, Bill Lepp. All of these folks are just wonderful, great storytellers. We're very excited. Look for more information on our Facebook page. I will also be performing along with Claire at the Women's Storytelling Festival from Better Said Than Done. So I'll put in a shameless plug for that. I can't wait to be on stage with all the wonderful 36 women. But thank you very much. March 29th, join us for 1-year celebration. We couldn't have done it without the support of all our fantastic fans and, of course, our storytellers. So wonderful evening. Thank you for joining us. Drive safe, everybody. We'll see you next time.
We're just going to bring our Zoom audience back on to say goodbye, and thank you everybody on YouTube, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you. 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical. So step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.